Well, welcome everyone to our session for today. And today's session, what better topic to start the new year than to talk about SOLIDWORKS 2025? My name is Michel Cloutier, and I'll be your host for today to cover some of the new enhancements that we have inside of SOLIDWORKS 2025. Now, before we get going, I just want to present the models we're going to be using from our customer Proteus Motion. They do exercising equipment, and that's actually their data that you're going to be seeing and on which we're going to be highlighting the new features and enhancements of SOLIDWORKS 2025. Now, SolidWorks 2025 was released in November, early November, so it's already been like 2 months now. But some of the enhancements, and there's over 200 enhancements, so obviously I won't have time to cover each and every one of them. But if you're actually using SolidWorks 2024, you might actually have seen some of those enhancements because where we used to years ago do all the enhancements at the initial release or a spec 0. Over the last couple of years, we started implementing those enhancements in service packs. So some of those enhancements you might actually have access to even in SolidWorks 2024. So without further ado, let's just dig in. We have, like I said, we do have a lot to cover. And the first thing I'm going to cover is parts, right? In SolidWorks, like I like to say, everything starts in a part, everything starts in a sketch. So many new enhancements. We have enhancements for cosmetic thread performance, Z-up templates. We're going to talk about chamfer selection accelerator, silhouette defeature, graphics triangle and face count, smooth variable size fillets, deleting rolled back features, auto repair sketch relations and dimensions, and measure projected area. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. So here's a fairly small assembly. It's a three-part assembly. And rather than having that as an assembly, I'd rather have that as a multi-body part. So in 25, we can simply say, yeah, go ahead and save that as a multi-body part. And you'll notice we now have Z-up templates, which aligns the orientation, but also all the planes for Z-up. Using my chamfer tool, I now have accelerators. So you might have seen those on fillets, but now we're implementing those accelerator on chamfers as well. Now, Groove Beat, I'm going to discuss that a little bit later on as well, but that's also a new feature in SolidWorks 2025. But one thing that we're also have in SolidWorks 2025 is the D feature in part mode. So we had D feature for assemblies for ages, for very long time, but now we're implementing that for part design. So if I have a part, I want to simplify this, maybe just because there's too much details, or maybe because I don't want to share all my intellectual property. I want to create a simplified model. I can do that in the part environment with the same interactive user interface that we've seen, that you've probably seen in assemblies for a while now. So here's my simplified model very quickly created in my part design. Again, for parts, we have more information in the performance evaluation tool. So we have face count and triangle count. And we can see the effects of those if we change the image quality, for example. So if we, put down the image quality to a lower number and hit OK, after we do a refresh, the performance evaluation, you see that the triangle, graphics triangle, and face count, graphics triangle is much, much less. Also in SOLIDWORKS 2025, we have an option for smooth variable size fillets. See, that fillet doesn't look really good, but with the smooth variable size fillet, now it looks exactly like I want it to. Also in SOLIDWORKS 2025, we have features that are below the rollback bar. Now, some of those features I might want to delete, but prior to 25, I had to roll back the feature so it would rebuild, and then delete it. But some of those features can take time. Now in SOLIDWORKS 25, I can delete them even though they are below the rollback bar, which is a nice productivity enhancement. Also in SOLIDWORKS 2025, we have the ability to create or measure projected areas. So for example, all these faces, I can project this face on a plane and then measure the projected area on that plane. And lastly, last thing I'm going to talk about for parts is the ability to quickly repair dangling entities. So for example, in the sketch, we have some dimensions that due to a change, to a design change, some of those dimensions are now dangling. So now we have the auto repair tool that I can simply select, or I can prompt from various places, find a replacement edge for that dimension. But if there's other errors, they're also going to be fixed at the same time. So really some nice productivity enhancements and new features for part design. Now I did say part design, and yes, sheet metal and weldment are technically parts, but I like to put them a bit different because that's sometimes a bit different workflow. But we do have a lot of enhancements for sheet metal and weldments. So some of the enhancements is the ability to copy cutlass properties. We're going to talk about bend notches, tab and slot enhancements, multi-length edge flange, groove beads, sheet metal flat pattern performance, and cutlass update performance. So in this weldment, it's a mix of weldment and sheet metal. So I go in my properties and I want to have, those cutlass properties, but I want to propagate that to many of my other cutlass. So now I can say copy to and say copy that property to all of my different cutlass items. Now, additionally, when maybe I want to copy one of those properties everywhere, but a few of them might be a bit different. So I can actually also specify to which one. So if it's not all, I can select, and now it's prompting me to override, or if I want to add a new property. But now, just again, a big time saver when we got to define those cut list items and properties. The other thing that I want to highlight is a new option inside of SOLIDWORKS 25 with bend notches. A lot of companies use those bend notches on flat patterns to identify where to bend, for example, as a way to save time in manufacturing. So, the operators don't have to measure or mark anything. So now we have those nice little bend notches that we can insert in our flat patterns. The other thing that I want to highlight is some of the tab and slot enhancements. So for example, in 25, there's an option to center align, equal offset, tab directions, and also instance to skip. So here's a good example. I want to make sure that the bracket is inserted in the right orientation. So on one of the sides, I'm going to skip one of those three instances. So now there's no possibility of making an error. It only will fit in this orientation. So that's a really nice little tip. The other thing too that we have in 2025 is the ability to create multi-length edge flanges in the same single operation. If you try to do that before SOLIDWORKS 2025, you would actually need to create two distinct features for my edge flange because they're not the same length. But now in 2025, I can do that, both of those flanges in the same operation. Again, a nice little time saver. And the last thing I want to talk about is groove beads. So you saw an example earlier. Here's another one that's typically more used in weldments and sheet metal cases. So we have that groove bead with full support for our weld symbol. So I can define the groove bead in my assembly and annotate that directly in the 3D model. So that annotation can go on a drawing later on if I need to. And also that those groove beads are just like any other features now, meaning that I can also use them in mirror commands, for example. So here I got my groove bead. I created just one, but it's going to be repeated symmetrical on both sides. So here we go. I just do a mirror feature and I've got everything ready to go. Now, talking about performance, we've also put some performance enhancements inside sheet metal. So, for example, the flattened performance is better for a large number of cuts and or bodies. And also the cutless update performance when there's a large number of cutless items has gotten better in SOLIDWORKS 2025. Now let's move to assemblies. Again, many new enhancements in assemblies. As always, performance evaluation, where we're going to talk about speed pack, a large design review. We're going to talk about display state table, document groups, copy with mates, and again, the Z up workflow. So here's our assembly from Proteus Motion. When I go in my performance evaluation, we actually report a bit more info now as well. So when we look at the previous version references, I have the file and file path for each of those files. And also we report better graphics triangle details with the ability to open those parts directly from SOLIDWORKS. So if I need to simplify a part that's too complex, like this screw, I don't have to, chase it down. I can simply open it from my performance evaluation tab. Also, we've made enhancements to SpeedPack. SpeedPack is a great way to simplify your model, especially when your assemblies start to get really big. And now we've made some enhancements in SpeedPack, the functionality itself, but also how they are displayed. So now in SOLIDWORKS 2025, we actually have control over that SpeedPack circle and how opaque or transparent it is. It is displayed on the screen. Now, SpeedPack is one way to work with very large assemblies. Another way to work with very large assemblies is using large design review. And in 25, the great news is that we can do even more in large design review than we used to. So in large design review, starting with 25, we now support breadcrumbs. One nice thing as well is the ability to preview components. So if I select a subassembly, I can preview it. And something I didn't mention, but in large design review, we can now do interference detection, something we could not do before. We could measure, we could section, but we could not do interference detection in large design review, and now we can. So now that I've detected I have a interference, I can now open the part in Resolved so I can have access to my full suite of editing tools. I can, change the diameter, update that, go back to my assembly and close the preview and go back to whatever I was doing before. If I open this subassembly in the resolved mode, we're going to talk about display state. So many of you hopefully use display states to hide and show different areas of your design, but sometimes when we have a lot of display states, it could be kind of hard to understand what's what. So now we can display all those display states in a table, which makes I think that's a really great enhancements with the usability of the tool. And now you can actually just toggle on and off the parts or assemblies or sub-assemblies that you want to show or hide in your display states, in each of those display states. And you see it's interactive. I check, apply, I'm done, good to go. The other thing that we're doing in SOLIDWORKS 2025 is document groups. So oftentimes when you're designing, you're probably going to be designing on the same couple sets of parts, assemblies, and drawings because you're kind of focused in that area. Now, instead of opening each of those individually, we can now create a document group that's going to, in one operation, open all the documents that you need to focus on, that you need to work. And that's how document groups work, which is a really nice, nice tool. Now here we're doing a bit of work here with the interference detection. and we see that we need to do maybe some changes or actually copy that bracket on the other side. Now we've had copy with mates for a long time, but we're actually improving the copy with mates in 2025 because now we can support advanced mates, things like those slot mates that was not supported when we did a copy with mate. So now they are supported in SOLIDWORKS 2025, which is a great enhancement. We're going to see actually here we're doing one with a slot mate, right? That we're copying the parts with the slot mate. That's an advanced type of mate. Here's another example where we're going to do the copy with mate using a center profile mate. Again, those types of mates were not supported when doing copy with mates before. So we had copy with mates for a long time, but now we're just improving the support for all those advanced mates. And the last thing I want to talk about is, again, the Z-up workflow. SOLIDWORKS has always been a Y-up orientation, right? The Y-axis is up, but in many industries, the Z-up is actually what defines the height of my designs. So now in SOLIDWORKS 2025, I can actually create I can create parts assemblies in that Z up orientation. And that's not only going to affect the orientation, like the view orientation, but also aligns my planes to be in the correct orientation. So the front is the front, even in the Z up orientation, and the top is the top, even in the Z up orientation. So here we're just mating my design so that everything is in the Z up orientation. So again, great enhancements inside of SOLIDWORKS 2025. I think that you'll find many of those useful as you start using SOLIDWORKS 2025. Now let's move to drawings and model-based definition. So we have quite a few enhancements again in drawings, as in all areas of the software. We have the ability to reload for drawings. We have a new surface finish symbol, or actually improved support for the standards for surface finish. We have the ability to export views as block that can be really useful if you're exporting to DWG, for example. And the ability to override BOM quantities. So when we look at this drawing, we've had the reload option for parts and assemblies since boy, I can since forever, in my opinion, probably. But we've never had it for drawings for some reason. So now we're actually putting that into drawings. The other thing that we want to talk about too is the BOM quantities and override. And when we look at this and we use the indent or the detailed cut list bill of materials, we see that the quantity is set to 1 and 2s. But sometimes in Wellman's, for example, the quantities is set to be length. So now in SOLIDWORKS 2025, we have better support for that. So when we use the calculate quantity using BOM quantity, it's actually going to look at the settings we've used in my cut list settings and use that as the BOM quantities rather than the piece count, right? So if in my BOM quantity cut list properties, I use length, that's what is going to use in my detailed cut list bill of material. The other thing that I do want to cover here is support for the surface finish symbol. So now in SOLIDWORKS 2025, we are compliant with the ISO standard 21920 that we weren't before. So now that we have that, we can put a check mark on that. And the last thing I want to talk about is when we need to export these drawings into DWG, we now have the option to save my views as blocks. So that becomes very useful if you want to do, let's say, a plant layout, for example, in 2D, or you just want to have the whole view as a block, it becomes much easier to manipulate that in your 2D environment. Here we're using DraftSite, but if you're using AutoCAD, it'd be very similar. Now, I also want to talk about SOLIDWORKS MBD. So MBD stands for Model-Based Definition, and we're seeing more and more companies going to this way of annotating in the 3D environment rather than creating 2D drawings. And to help them, we have a lot new enhancements for that. So now with SOLIDWORKS 2025, MBD is actually a proper add-in, makes it much more flexible, especially in network environments. We can now dimension from feature dimensions, and create my 3D annotation from feature dimensions. We have a better support for drafted features and also more controls for step 242 exports. So here's the part design that I want to annotate in 3D. You see that some of it is already annotated, right? There's few dimensions on it. I'm going to turn on my SOLIDWORKS MBD add-in. As you can see, it's a proper add-in now, so it makes it much easier to float around if you're in a network environment. And here's an example where we want to dimension the angle, and that, in the past that proved to be very difficult to do so. But now we can simply define, hey, I wanted to, create a dimension, a angle dimension between these two faces, and that top face is gonna be like my reference. And now very easily I can define this angle dimension in my MBD model. So as I reposition that, the other thing I want to discuss is that many of those dimensions that I want to annotate in 3D already exist in the form maybe of a sketch or a feature dimension. So starting with 2025, we can actually repurpose existing sketch or features, sketch dimensions in my 3D annotation. So I don't need to recreate all of those dimensions. If they already exist, I can simply repurpose them in my 3D annotation. And last thing I want to talk about is the ability to export in step 242. So using SOLIDWORKS MBD, it does give us the ability to export in step 242, but we have more controlled information or option to split periodic faces or export the face edge properties into my step 242. So downstream application that is going to read that step 242 have better information with the step file. So going forward, we're going to talk about collaboration. More and more companies are adopting the 3D Experience platform to, store and revise their data. And now we're introducing in 25 a number of enhancements to make that process smoother and easier. We've incorporated quick tours, we have 3D swim integration, update notification, drawing approval stamps. So, I'm going to touch on SOLIDWORKS PDM a little bit as well, bookmark editor, and history. So if you're new or you are in the process of adopting the 3D Experience platform, some of the notions and the concepts might be a little unfamiliar. So now we're actually giving you those quick tours that can simply help you understand all of those concepts, like bookmarks or maybe a collaborative space, just walking you through that concept and helping you understand how to save and manage your SOLIDWORKS data on the cloud. So these are really nice enhancements inside of SOLIDWORKS 2025. Additionally, as well, is that we have much better 3D Swim integration. 3D Swim is our collaborative method, like the tool we use to, collaborate with one another. So you see here two colleagues chatting with one another. In Swim, it's directly integrated right inside of SOLIDWORKS. I actually have access to 3D markup tools that are fully 3D enabled markup tools. So if my colleague puts a markup and ask me to do some changes, I can just look at the model and do those changes inside of SolidWorks and simply, text back that everything is good to go. So a really tight integration without ever leaving SolidWorks to do it. This is done completely inside of SolidWorks. Additionally, as well, we have update notifications. So you notice right prior I did a change. How do I know? How do others know that there's been a change? Well, there's this little notification. I can simply reload the file, and very quickly I'm able to continue working even if someone else changed that document. I have those nice little update notification inside of SolidWorks. Again, because the data is stored on the cloud and the data was not released yet, maybe I just saved it